Hey all, thank you for listening to today's podcast. Just a heads up before you listen that some sensitive topics are addressed, so please use discretion according to your own frame and those around you. Hello and welcome to More Bible, the official podcast of Reformation Covenant Church. In Jesus' high priestly prayer, he asked that his Father would sanctify his people in truth, and then affirmed, "Your word is truth." So in seeking to be a means of answering our Lord's Prayer, in each episode, pastors and church officers will take questions from church members and provide answers from the Bible so that our people can grow in a deeper, more faithful understanding and application of God's Word to their daily lives. I'm Brewer, the associate pastor here at Reformation Covenant Church, and I'm joined once again with Pastor Cogbill. And today we're going to talk about a serious, sensitive, important topic related to intimacy in marriage and the bounds of propriety of intimacy in marriage. This is something that has become sort of a hot topic of recent years, as various things have been uncovered, men who truly have been abusing their power, but unfortunately lots of things have sort of been lost in the debris with that. And so we wanted to take a few minutes today to maybe think biblically about it, how to think about intimacy within marriage, and specifically that line of propriety. When have things gone too far with in the marriage covenant, and can things go too far in the marriage covenant? And as we do that, there's really one important text. I mean, there's a number of texts in Scripture that deal with marriage and intimacy, but the crux verse, the crucial verse here is 1 Corinthians chapter 7, beginning in verse 1. This is the Apostle Paul writing to the Corinthian church. "Now concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer. But then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." Again, that's 1 Corinthians chapter 7. I was reading from the ESV. If you had a different translation, it may actually vary pretty significantly from what was said there. So, Bo, why this topic? And what are you, how to frame this question? Why this topic, and how do you think we should begin this conversation?
It's a very difficult conversation to have. I think, like anything else, when there is an outcry, it's because of a legitimate abuse. So the feminist movement is a recognition that men were not doing things that men should be doing, and there's a void that opens up, and then voices fill that void because there's something missing.
Yes.
You saw this, 10, 15 years ago. You're seeing it a little bit now. Men being effeminate, not leading. A void opens up, and boisterous, loud, supposedly manly men fill the void with their voice. I think this topic is similar in that there has been and have been serious cases of grievous, ungodly, unchristlike marriages where men abdicate leadership and then force leadership and are selfish and really do treat their wives terribly. And there's a recognition of that, and there's a void that opens up where people speak true things into that void, and yet not always in a completely accurate biblical way.
Yeah.
So the reaction against feminism is like a hypermasculinity that isn't biblical masculinity.
Yes.
The reaction against biblical marriage gone terrible, which isn't biblical marriage, the voice that speaks into that isn't biblical marriage. It's the hyper reaction against it. And and so I think just acknowledging that there's the outcry is probably legitimate, and yet we still need to read more Bible and, well, what does God think about this? What does God say about this?
Yes.
And I do think it's unavoidable that absolutely there is a such thing as marital rape, and it is a godless, unchristlike, unacceptable, completely contrary to the gospel and how Christ treats his church.
Yeah, I think I really appreciated what you said. The abuse, the cry of abuse or something often is the sign of something real going on that needs to be addressed, and then the hole is filled by terrible things or reactionary things, not responsive things, but reactionary things. We saw this in the Me Too movement, right?
Right.
Harvey Weinstein and other guys were exposed for being truly lecherous, horrific men who were abusing their roles and gratifying themselves through it. But then that opened the floodgates for almost anything and everything.
And then the other reaction happens.
Right.
So now, she's probably just, you'll see this with professional athletes.
Right.
It's probably a money grab.
Right.
Well, it might be, but that's a reaction.
Yes.
You have to stay impartial.
Right.
You have to examine each case. You have to figure out what's actually true here, because anytime you overreact, all you're doing is creating another void.
Right.
And then that's discrediting the actual people who really do need help and who really have been hurt.
Right.
You're seeing it in the abuse movement.
Right.
The word abuse used to mean something very significant, very tragic,
Yes.
very painful. Well, now that word has gotten so flattened out.
Yes.
Now women and men and children are saying that, but nobody... Well, not nobody. There's a group of people not listening or that don't default to listening because it's like, oh, sure. Now they're just,
Right.
So we can't react and then react to the reaction. We have to examine the case biblically.
Right.
Say, what does God say about this? And then let's think God's thoughts after him.
Being neither prejudicial to the victim nor to the perpetrator, but to justice.
You're impartial.
Right, exactly. And I mean, this is a tricky topic, marital rape, because of the text that we read. If you had the ESV, the tricky verse there is verse 3. In the ESV, it's the husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. In the Greek, it says, let the man give to the wife essentially what is owed to her. Right. And I say marital rape is tricky not because there's not a clear-cut line, but because for most people they hear this verse and they think, I'm owed sex. Right. And if I'm not getting it, well, then maybe it's mine. Why can't I just take it?
Right.
And I think even if you're not, you don't have to be a rapist in your marriage to think that way. You can allow bitterness and frustration and strife to enter in because your spouse isn't giving what you think is owed to you.
Right.
And I've heard Catholic theologians talk about this. I believe in the Vulgate, it is translated as debitum, debt. How would you respond to someone who said that? But Paul says that the husband is to give to his wife what is due to her, and the wife is to give to her husband what is due to him.
Yeah.
How would you respond? How would you? That's sort of a flat reading of that text. And how do you think we can think more biblically about a good interpretation of what Paul's saying there?
Well, I would say keep reading. Right. So we stop there. We're not finished. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Keep reading. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. So this is a theme throughout. Paul is unity, deferring to the other person out of love, laying down your own rights, following Christ. Paul's teaching here is that you aren't your own.
Yes.
You belong to the other person. You should lay down what you think you're owed for sake of loving the other person. He makes a similar allusion, I think, in Ephesians 5, where he says, husbands ought to love their wives like they love their own body.
Yes.
No one hates his own body.
Yes.
And so for a guy or anyone to come to this passage and stop reading and say, well, you need to give me what I'm owed, you're fundamentally going against the whole point of this text. And your wife could do the same thing back, right? Your body belongs to me.
Yes.
And she could say, well, your body belongs to me, so don't touch me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
but that's not the point of the verse.
Right.
Paul is trying to help couples love one another.
Right.
He's trying to foster a good, godly, loving, my life for yours marriage that
Yes.
reflects the gospel.
Yes.
And anytime we come to any text more worried about what someone else isn't doing that they should be doing, that then allows us to justify our own sin,
Yes.
that's pharisaical, that's
Yes.
hypocritical, that's
Yes.
going to put us in a whole world of danger. And I
Yes.
think that's what's happened. I think anytime you take the Bible out of context, you're going to do damage. And I think that's what's happened with these verses.
Yeah, I mean, even going back up to the beginning, concerning the things which you write, it is good for man not to touch a woman is the Greek. In this, it is good for man not to have sexual relations with a woman. It seems like Paul's addressing a particular problem where the spouse is refusing to give conjugal rights to the spouse, right? He's not writing here. So in this case, he's not writing here to the wives who are being withheld from. He's writing to the husbands who are for some, glorified view of asceticism are withholding their conjugal rights to their wives. Or he's writing to the wives who are withholding from the husband. He's talking to them.
Right.
He's not saying that this gives the other spouse the right to say, you owe me.
Make demands.
Yeah.
Right.
He's saying, no, you owe them. Like the point of the Christian life is to say, it's a debt of love. What Paul talks about in Romans 14, the debt of love that we owe to one another. And love is not self-seeking. That's the first thing that we're told. One of the first things that we're told in 1 Corinthians 13. It doesn't seek itself. It doesn't seek its own good. It seeks the good of the other. And if husbands are called to love their wives like their own body, if your body needs sleep, if your personal body, your physical body needs sleep, you're probably not going to say, you know what we should do right now?
Right.
Go for a 20-mile run.
Right.
You're not going to do that. You would never do that to your own body. So why would you do that to the person who is your body? Why would you treat them in that way? It is a distortion, and it's no different than the man who flagellates himself,
Right.
or the man who abuses his body for the sake of some perverse gain that he thinks he's going to have. You're manipulating something for your own personal benefit, for your own personal gain, and you're fundamentally corrupting what this is all about.
Yeah, and I think that doesn't only apply to the act of being intimate, but also what kind, how often is the conscience being involved at all?
Yes.
Right. So it's not just give me the act, but are you both enjoying this?
Yes.
Is this something that you're seeking to bless the other person with?
Yes.
If your spouse's conscience is at all bothered, at all, you should not do it.
Yes.
Right. And if it becomes an issue, talk to somebody quick.
Yes.
I mean, I think we've talked about this before, how the bedroom can be like a check engine light. So if there's something going on in the bedroom that feels off at all, get some help, because that's not something people talk about a lot. It's not like you run around like, hey, by the way, is this something? No, but in those moments, there's going to be times where you have questions. You have, especially if you've entered into a marriage without any previous experience.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're doing things the way God would want you to do them, then there's probably going to be a lot of questions that come up. And unfortunately, in our time, more men have been exposed to things even if they haven't themselves done it, they've been watching people
Yes.
do certain things, and their wives, God bless them, are entering into this marriage with this guy, and they're being asked to do unspeakable things, and they have no idea whether that's right, wrong, or whatever.
Yeah.
Please don't, if you're listening to this, if you have questions like over frequency or kind or whatever, don't sit on that for months and years, because that's going to be just the place that's supposed to be the most free, the most joyful, the most wonderful my life for yours experience in both directions can just become poison and rot and destroy everything.
Well, and it doesn't help that there are major Christian authors who are publishing marriage books that it's almost as if the marriage bed is an opportunity for you to live out your fantasies on whatever that is. And they're advocating all sorts of what I believe are perverse practices. You can go into I remember hearing this a lot when I appreciate so much the purity movement. I don't want to be the person who's denigrating the purity movement, but there was this idea of sex is the greatest thing, and it's your pleasure is, and then they were trying to hold this thing up rightly, but they actually, in some of the conversations, they make it about your pleasure,
right?
And that is. Sex is meant to be a gift for our pleasure, absolutely. But that's like the tertiary purpose, right? So if we think of different ends, different goals of sex, the purpose of sex, we can tier them in different ways, I think. I think the first tier is physical procreation. Doesn't mean every sex act needs to be procreative, but that's really one of the main reasons that God is. The next one is service. It's the serving the partner, giving yourself over to the other person. Third on that list maybe is your personal pleasure, if not down below that. So the thing that makes sex so wonderful is not the fact that you're getting pleasure. The thing that makes sex so wonderful is you get to serve another person completely.
You get to bring them pleasure.
You get to bring them pleasure. Right. That's right. And so you can to actually pervert that and to make the marriage bed about your pleasure is actually to fundamentally corrupt it. And in that sense, it's even more perverse than the pornographer. There's a certain level of egregiousness when a husband rapes his wife. Right. That is unique because of how holy that bed ought to be. The vows that you've taken.
On who he's representing to her. Right.
Yes.
We talk about the office of husband as it's an office of representing Christ to his wife.
Right.
Just like we talk about fathers.
Right.
You have the office of father.
Yes.
Therefore, all of your behavior communicates to the people in your home what fatherness looks like.
Yes.
You can't get out of it.
Right.
You're either going to do that well or you're going to do it terribly.
Yes.
Most of us somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Same with husbands.
Yes.
You are, this mystery that I refer to is Christ and the church. You are, this is how God built this thing. So when you do something like that, you are telling a blatant, high-handed lie about the person and work of Christ for his church that he loves and would do anything for.
Yes.
You are not your own. You were bought with a price.
Right.
So glorify God in your bodies.
Right.
Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit? You are not your own. The whole gospel is I don't live for my own desires and pleasures.
Yes.
I'm always asking, how can I glorify God?
Yes.
How can I love God? How can I love my neighbor?
Yes.
And that doesn't stop in the bedroom. That should be the climax of the whole day where you've spent loving your wife. Right. And I would venture to say if and we're using men, it can go the other way. I've seen women do some pretty horrible things as well. But I would venture to say if the pattern of the man's life is like Christ loves his church, then his wife's response to that love will not be one that has any semblance of needing to coerce anything out of anybody.
Yes.
Because she's going to have an example of what it looks like to be loved.
Yes.
And she's going to reflect that in the way that she loves.
Yes.
So it's, all that to say, it is highly, highly egregious.
Yeah. No, it's it's sad when people are when people say they've never heard of that concept, or
Right,
they've been in churches,
Oh,
and
man.
and it's hard to know how seriously to take in terms of whether that was true or whether they weren't well conditioned to listen to it, or they had other people telling them. And I've heard stories of family members pressuring wives or husbands to do things that were not okay.
Well, any form of manipulation,
Right.
power, control. I mean, I think Paul could be alluding to Exodus 21 and how a man is supposed to not diminish the food, clothing, or marital rights. Now, in that case, it's if he takes another wife.
Yeah.
But all the more, your one wife, which we are called to have. So a guy who would diminish an allowance or not, love his wife or be tender with his wife so that she knows, or I need you to help me, or, like this, it gets into some really weird things that if she's not performing these acts for me, well, then I don't even know what I'm going to do.
Right.
It's like, that's just insane.
Well, and also on the flip side, where sex by the woman can be used as some sort of manipulation as well. I'm going to withhold until you do basically what I want.
And that's where I think that's the void that we talked about earlier. You've got a just outcry against a very real offense. The response and the reaction is, well, you've misused sex. Now I'm going to misuse sex. And I'm justified in doing so. Fill in whatever the blank is, right? And so then you get kind of a Christian version of critical theory gets adopted, and now women turn into the abuser, even though they don't technically think you can fall under that category because of the nature of critical theory and their status as woman.
Right.
But the Bible doesn't talk that way.
Right.
The Bible does have a category for the reviling wife.
Right.
It does have a category for the woman who would misuse her body and sin against her husband. And that's where we would get into trouble for applying all the same things we just said about guys. We would say God applies those to women just in their relationship as the church to Christ. So that's where I think people, again, understandably reacting against something bad, put us in the boat of something bad because we're not willing to go all the way over into the void with them. That would also be an unbiblical way of responding.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to. What we don't want to say is, okay, wives, you now have to have sex with your husband every single time.
Of course.
And we also don't want to say, a husband. We do want to say a husband needs to be pursuing his wife and coming after her, and to basically telling the husband, hey, you need to be pursuing your wife. You need to love your wife. You need to desire your wife, and if she says no, no means no.
Right.
And you gladly say, yeah, okay, absolutely,
because you love her more than you love yourself.
Exactly, you love her.
You love
you love him. Yes, right. Exactly.
So the Paul's exhortation to love your wife as you love your own body. Well, as bad as you think you want it in that moment, and she doesn't, you need to not want it.
Right. That's right.
She's your body. You're one person. And again, if you're going a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks without being intimate, I think you should get some help.
Yeah.
Because I think there's something else that's maybe wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe something has happened in your past that makes being intimate with one another really scary. Maybe there's bitterness creeping in. Maybe you're being lazy. Maybe I mean, there's a million things that could be going wrong.
Yes.
But if you're going for any significant week, 2, 3, or longer without being together, well, where else is my life for yours not being lived?
Right. Yeah. And I would recommend guys who are wondering, how can I grow in this? How can I develop more compassion, more sympathy for my wife in this area? Because this is a unique area for guys, I believe, and for women too, but for guys in growing healthily or growing in health in our sexuality because of various things we've experienced, is I would say look around your life. And where else are you just interested in your pleasure?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, where are you just sort of doing the easy thing.
How
And
overweight are you? How much food are you eating?
And how late do you stay up just binge watching?
Right.
And I speak to my own condemnations. I mean, all of us can grow in various ways in how we are just self-seeking. And, a book that I would really recommend on this issue is a book called, it's not actually related to sexual ethics, but it's called The Four Cardinal Virtues by Joseph Pieper. And one of the things he talks about is chastity is, the virtue of chastity is not just being controlled sexually.
Yes.
The virtue of chastity is having your sexual desires oriented to their correct end, right? So you're chaste not because you didn't have sex before marriage.
Right.
You're chaste because you are actively pushing your desires to their proper end.
That's right.
Which means that in marriage, chastity means you're pushing your desires to the love of your spouse, right? It's not a matter of how frequent it is. I mean, that's important. Frequency matters, but the thing that really matters is when you're tempted to choose your own desires or the desires of another person, what are you pushing your heart towards? Right. What are you trying to develop? And really, one of the interesting things that this guy talks about is chastity is a matter of justice too. What you owe and what you owe to other people and how you ought to treat them.
And you owe them love.
You owe them love. Yeah. Right. Unchastity is not just misdirected desires, it's fundamentally selfishness, right? So it's not just lack of self-control. It's a selfishness that perverts justice between other people. And so because virtue is something that we cultivate in all of our lives,
right?
Begin looking at other things. Where can you serve your wife? Where can you
and ask her?
That's right. Can you begin cleaning the kitchen? Can you begin doing a number of these things that you
and
want,
not to get sex
and not to get sex,
right?
but truly to serve her.
Yes,
yeah, truly to serve her, and not doing it grumblingly like she's not, but doing it gladly. And if she says no, say, all right, good night. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. I'm looking forward to serving you in whatever I can. Yeah. Right. Begin doing that, doing the hard thing, and you will find it might be slow, but you will find that chastity grows. Right. It grows. It can grow quicker than you think.
Well, and that's why I think young guys got to start it before they get married.
Yes.
Push your desires toward their proper end before you get married.
Yes.
Because if you want to find out how selfish you are, get married.
Yes.
And then you want to find out even how more selfish you are, have kids.
Yes.
And I don't think any of us is really ready for what we're going to find out about ourselves once we get married and have kids. But if you want to set yourself up to fail, look at porn.
Yes.
If you want to set yourself up to fail, play video games for 6 hours. Completely live your own life and want to get married so that you can finally get to have sex with your wife. See how that works out for you. Yeah. It's not going to go well.
Yeah.
So we all, to your point, the selflessness, the rightly ordered desires, those are things we have to be fighting all day, every day, at every stage of life.
Yes.
You mentioned the four cardinal virtues. I think that's really good. There's a book that recently came out. I put it up on Realm a few weeks ago now, Redeeming Sex in Marriage. How the Gospel Rescues Sex, Transforms Marriage, and Reveals the Glory of God by Scott Mell, I think is how you say his name. But it's really good. The first half of the book, he spends developing a theology of marriage. And then he gets into some of the nitty gritty without, I think, being vulgar.
Oh, good.
So I think he does a good job of threading that needle. And then I think it's in the appendices, he begins to deal with things like sexual abuse in the past, the more darker side of things. He answers practical questions about conscience in ways that I think are biblical and helpful. So I would really recommend that. And again, if there's anything that feels off in the bedroom, there's probably other things off. And so we want to help you guys with that.
Yes.
If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. We want to work with you all through this, and it's a very sensitive issue, and we want to have confidence still in what God says, and confidence that if there's something wrong, that real change can occur, and we can find true delight in these things, even if it's going to be hard, and it can be, but God is good. God is faithful in the good gifts that He's given us as true gifts to us.
They really, really are good.
Yeah.
And I want to end it being super clear. No spouse is permitted to use guilt, power, money, or any form of coercion to control or force their spouse to have sex with them. Rape within marriage is fundamentally opposed to everything marriage is supposed to be. It's grounds for divorce, grounds for church discipline, grounds for legal action. So if there's ever any question about what our church or our church leadership believes about it, you're hearing it from our own mouths,
Yes.
what we believe. It is
Yes.
it's an abominable sin that is not beyond the mercy of Christ, but deserves the full wrath of God.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we've got for today. We hope that this discussion has been helpful to you. If you've got questions about this particular issue or just any issue at all, please feel free to contact myself or Pastor Cogbill or any of the other pastors here at Reformation Covenant Church, or you can send us an email at morebible@reformationcovenant.org. Again, that's morebible@reformationcovenant.org. Until next time, remember to make best use of the time that God's given you for His glory in the life of the world. Goodbye.